ahead and get rid of everything that's showing. Okay, so the first thing that I did was I decided what I wanted to do, which was I wanted to do some sort of moody forest scene involving wolves. So I went online, tried to find something that works, and I ended up finding this. It was probably not exactly what I wanted, but it was definitely the closest thing I could find. I have a tendency to make two copies, and that's an old habit because I never used to use masks, and so everything I did was destructive, and I always wanted something to fall back onto. So when I used to do this, almost everything had a copy. If I was going to do some sort of cutting out or erasing, there would always be an untouched copy. There's really no point for this to be here, but it's here. So I decided that I wanted to change the visual to this. I felt the highlights could be probably a little bit warmer. I wanted the trees to appear a little more brown than they are right now. It just looks kind of grayish. So I went ahead and added a gradient map. I used a lot of gradient maps in this. As you can see, it makes it appear the trees are browner. The shadows are actually more of a bluish tone, while the rest of it almost feels slightly warm. Pretty much to add a gradient map, I just go down here, click gradient map. It brings this up, and it brings this box up here. You just double click on here, presets. There's a photo right here. You click on that, brings up all these. There's plenty of times where I'm not sure what I want, so I'll just wander through, clicking on each one, see how it looks, and eventually I come across something I like, which ended up being this one, the cyan sepia. And then brought this down to about half because it looks crazy full blown. So next were the wolves. So I went pretty much onto Google and just searched wolves. Just like I'm pretty sure I went to Google and searched forest for this one. I might have gone to Adobe Stock. When you have Photoshop, I believe you have access to Adobe Stock. So if you're worried about copyright, like if you plan on selling something or if it's going to be published, then I would go somewhere like Adobe Stock, or there's plenty of other places that have these images. So we'll go ahead and go to the first wolf, and I've disabled everything so you can see how he originally looked. And that was just an image right off of Google. Saved it, imported it, and now after I import it, I size it to where I want, angle it how I want, where usually I'll throw in something that kind of helps me see it better within the picture. Like soft light usually works out. You can see through it and kind of imagine it a little bit better. You can also reduce the fill or opacity, and that's what I end up doing for all of them to figure out where I want them. So I go ahead and create a layer mask, which you just, while on the layer, click the mask down here, it'll pop up this guy, and I want to get rid of everything around him. If you double click, you open up the layer mask, and plus or minus, depending on what you want to do, will help you get rid of certain aspects. So after he's cut out and in there, and it's not perfect, but Tater Tot, come here, buddy. Come here. Come on. Come here, Tot. Come here. So like I was saying, the mask isn't perfect. You can see it's a rough cut, just something to give the impression of fur. But it doesn't really matter how small he is. You're not going to see any of the real details unless you zoom in. So after that, he's way too sharp. So I added a blur filter to help him blend in a little bit better. And at this point, everything's going to revolve around him blending in with the environment. So we'll go ahead and zoom out so you can see the depth. The first thing is the hue saturation. And you can see we just lightened them up and desaturated them a little bit. I'm not sure if this was intentional. Maybe not. Sometimes I put the sliders and I just forget about them. We'll pop back up to the brightness and contrast, which just flattens them out. Yeah, drop the contrast all the way, drop the brightness a little bit. And you could see the difference. Just finding that spot where it feels like he fits. And in this, I could have spent a lot more time if I really wanted to. But at a certain point, you're not really helping anything. You're just wasting time. But of course, if you're trying to figure things out, waste all the time you want. In this one, drop the white output down to help them blend in a little bit more. And then raise the blacks in this all the way up. Drop the whites down a little bit. So pretty much it all ends up getting him to blend in with what he's next to. And of course it's not perfect, but it does the job. It creates the illusion. So next we got this guy over here. I actually thought about getting rid of him because he's kind of goofy, but also because of that reason I decided to keep him in. And blur, of course, because he's way too sharp. Go ahead and bring down the the saturation and lighten them up a little bit. Oh, no, didn't want to do that. And it kind of, for every wolf, it's the same thing. Just as you can see, hue, brightness, level, curves. Brighten them up, lower the contrast, lower the white output, raise up the blacks. Not perfect, but good enough. And I say that like I'm running through it quick and I got this all figured out. I guarantee I spent a whole lot of time bouncing back and forth between a whole lot of things, arguing with myself until I settled with this. There's always a certain point where you just have to decide, okay, good enough, moving on. So now we'll go ahead and check out the next wolf. Boom, this guy. I like this guy a lot. Very striking. And what I did as far as his mask goes, I cut off his feet to fit in with the little hill right there. It helped kind of set him in the scene a little bit better. I did not add any blur to him. I probably could have added a little bit, but it still worked out because he's fairly close. But looking at it now, it's like, yeah, I should have added a little bit. Brightness, you can see that instantly helps him fit in a little bit better by bringing down that contrast. bringing down the white output, raising up the blacks a bit to help them fit into the environment. And that's the thing, like, once I figured out what works for one of the wolves, I pretty much took these three, sometimes four, depending on the wolves. So I'd copy all four and paste them to each one. Then I would go through each one and see what little adjustments needed to be made. That way I wasn't starting from scratch every single time. And as you can see, the adjustments really help them fit into that little spot right there. And you got this guy, pops out like a sore thumb. Came from this picture. And then we'll just go through. And you'll see that a lot of these help in small increments, but then you'll get that one that just really seals it. And I find with this, it's definitely the curves bringing up the blacks because of the kind of hazy environment, and it works especially after we add the snow. Next, this guy, you don't even see this guy, but I kept him in there anyways. I mean, after the blur, he's just a shape. Then he ends up getting lost behind the model. So here we add the white wolf for contrast, and you can see I didn't put a layer mask on this, so this would be the destructive habit I was talking about. So what I cut out from him is just how it is, unless I wanted to re-import the photo and do it all again, which wouldn't be too bad. And you can see in the environment, I went ahead and put his feet into the snow, kind of helping cement him in a little bit more. And then add in brightness, the levels, and the curves. And that's pretty much the wolves. Now we'll go ahead and work on the model. So we bring in the model, and this was slightly, I did this in a destructive way as well, but then I used a mask to fix his hair for whatever reason. The original picture, just so you could see that, okay, so this is the original picture. It was taken kind of a gloomy, it was almost nighttime, and I knew I just wanted him walking, looking off to the side as if he knows the wolves are there, but he's keeping his cool. Just kind of gave him some sort of narrative to work off of, and then just snap photos from the point of the deck to the back of the yard. Just had him walking the whole time. Went ahead and edited it, and this is what the end result of that was. It's nothing fancy, but I knew it would work for the composite. So that's where that came from. And then levels, wanted to darken up his clothes. And you could see masked out his hands and his face. And went ahead and just took down the output and darkened it up a bit. Then we moved on to the second levels, which were for, I believe, just his pants. to help it blend in a little bit more. Didn't like the lighter jeans. You'll see everything's masked out but the jeans. And I kept the cuffs because I wanted them to be a little brighter. Again, just adjusting. So the photo filter, went ahead, added that in, this grayish blue color to kind of give that overall cold feel to him. So went ahead and added the hue saturation. Looks like it was just for his clothes. They were too blue and colorful, so went ahead and dropped them down. Add some curves to bring up the blacks, darken up the midtones. It looks like that was just for his clothes. Yeah, just kept his skin the same because his skin is already desaturated and has a little bit of blue added to it. Now we're going to go ahead and throw on the gradient map, which adds a little bit more of the blue. I believe overall to the clothes. Yeah, just the clothes. And let's see. It's that. So the highlights get a little bit of a warmer tone, but it's mostly midtones and darks. So we'll go ahead and roll back on that, and you'll see first thing we darken up the clothes, darken up the pants, add the photo filter, kind of give it a desaturated gloomy blue, and then we desaturate the clothes even more. Bring up the blacks, add a gradient map to give it an overall washed out blue look, and then we'll go up to this layer here. Let's do this one first. This, I wanted to give his shoes a little bit of a frosty look, so I went ahead and took an image of ice, I believe it was. You'll be able to see that. It's literally just a snow texture. Okay, so I grabbed a snow texture. Again, I probably just did a quick search, found something I liked, and I threw it over his shoes. I then went ahead and cut out where I wanted it to be. I chose to work it around like the crevices and the laces. Then I went to blend mode and soft light. I felt that was a pretty good like snow frosted over on the shoes. I brought it down, I'd say right about there looks good. And then after that, I went ahead and drew in just some more white to give it like a clumped snow look. Obviously, it's not perfect, but once you zoom out, it looks fine. The hue saturation is so minuscule. I think at this point, I was just being picky. Yeah, you almost can't even see the difference. That was probably one of those times where I just sat there and just kept messing with it and messing with it and messing with it. This layer appears to be nothing. I'm gonna guess this was for a previous edit that I was doing. You can see it doesn't really match up with anything. I was probably doing shading with some of the snow. I had footprints in here, but I lost that layer, so that's probably what that was for. Here, adding a little more depth to the footprint. Just drew that in with a brush. And then we got another hue saturation that barely does anything. So this does almost nothing. So that was probably pointless. We'll go down here and add in the footprints taken from this image. I did a layer mask to cut out the footprints. I used a very soft brush, as you can see. Probably could do it a little bit better. Click on the mask, just go in, use the brush. The bigger the brush, the softer the edges. And then we go ahead and what was it? I believe it was multiply. Yeah. I use multiply to blend this one in. Drop the fill just a little bit. You probably could just leave it all the way up, but we'll go ahead and drop the fill. After this point is the snow. The snow is what really makes, I believe, all of it come together. And for these, because the original image is black on white, use screen to get rid of the black. And this one is just a little added layer of some extra snow here and there just to fill it out. So I added a gradient map, which brought it back to the original forest look, which I liked the browns, but for the moodiness, it looked a lot better like this. And my last final touch that I did to bring the focus to him and really make the woods seem more shadowy and ominous, I took a brush on a new layer and just filled in with a very, very soft brush the areas around him, and it just creates this focus where the light is, where he is, and kind of puts them in the shadows. And that's the process I used to get this photo. It's probably not the best, probably not the worst, but got the job done. I look at this and I see all kinds of things I want to do further. Little edits, add some stuff, take away some things. I still look at this and think to myself, should I get rid of him? Probably not. Well, I hope this helped you out. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me.